Hello and welcome to KOFISI Connect podcast, where this week we've got the Escape Book Club back in the studio with us. I'd like to welcome Mogoi Ayienda, who's with me today. How are you?
Hi, lovely to have you host me.
Well, we haven't had you before, so it's welcome. Welcome to KOFISI 9.
Thank you.
So the book that you recently discussed with the Escape Book Club was My Life in Crime by John Kiriamiti, one of Kenya's best-selling novels, but a slightly controversial book. I know you had lots to discuss in the book club, so I would love to hear some of your thoughts. First of all, I just kind of want to understand. I understand it was banned in Kenyan schools when it first came out, but everybody had read it. Tell me why you think, first of all, it was banned, and but then also what the attraction or the allure of the story was.
So, of course, the book is set in the between the 1960s and 1970s, but I think he wrote it around 1984. So it's the first time a criminal quote unquote is talking about his life in crime. So he takes us right in the deep of him doing the criminal things. And I think for a lot of maybe older people and the education system, they felt that this was in a way encouraging crime, because when you read it, there's a bit of a hero aspect to him being a criminal. Right. And so there's that thought process of, if someone reads this, then they might be compelled to actually get into crime. And so I think that's the reason why. And it's actually the first time an author has written, criminal books have been written, I think, but a lot of times they're not usually in the thick of it. So it's third person, someone explaining. It's a detective book where the detective is doing the job. Right. But now this is the criminal doing the job and telling us about it. So it felt a bit of we don't want people thinking that this is a cool thing to do.
I mean, but it is an incredible story. I mean, you kind of, you go through, take me through a sort of a synopsis. I mean, I'm sure that hundreds, most people here have read it, but it is quite gripping.
Yes, so it's about Jack Zolo. That's the name he goes by. So he leaves rural home Murang'a and comes to Nairobi for school in senior school. And so while at it, he goes on a strike and is expelled from school. But instead of going home and telling his parents he's been expelled so that they find something else for him to do, or maybe find another school for him to join, he decides he wants to do the other thing, which is lie to his parents about him going to school. So they send the school fees, they give him pocket money, but he leaves in the morning and comes back in the evening. But he gets caught. And so they take him back to rural Murang'a, but he robs his dad of 600 shillings and comes to Nairobi. And so when he gets back to Nairobi, he has to survive because he has no job, he has no source of income, he has no roof over his head. And so it's basically how he was trying to make a life in Nairobi, but not through the right way. He decided to do it. He actually got thrown into the criminal life right from the start because he saw someone pickpocket and they saw him see them, and he told them they'd have to split the money, and that's how they became friends. From there on, he walks us through the journey of his life as a criminal, and he's trying to live right, which he never did until he got caught. All through the time, he actually gets arrested and is imprisoned for 20 years. So it's basically a story about all that.
And then he writes the book in prison.
And he writes the book in prison. He actually writes 5 other books, but this is the most popular one. And so this is now how we meet him the first time.
And there's a big, strong theme of morality throughout the book. Jack kind of knows what he's doing wrong, but he sort of makes you part of the journey as the reader, doesn't he? He kind of uses techniques like calling you the reader, my brother, my friend. So you kind of feel almost like complicit in his crimes. How do you, when you were reading the book, how did you feel about Jack?
Honestly, I didn't think of him as a hero, but I actually, at some point, I found myself empathizing with him and vouching for him and hoping that he actually gets away with a crime. I mean, and other different circumstances, I would probably be the person asking that he be lynched, and because of all the things he did that I felt were unnecessary. He was a young guy. He could have gotten a job and made a life for himself, but he decided to go the other direction, which was this easier way out, although it doesn't seem that easy when he talks about it. Yeah, but from the start, he starts by putting himself in a position of remorse. And so when I'm reading the book, I'm feeling that he's writing the book with a sense of regret, and that he's received redemption, and he's sort of trying to tell us how it happened so that we don't do it. But like when you think about it, like when you are really thinking about it, it feels a bit of a brag. The book feels a bit of a brag where he's sort of like thumping his chest and saying, yo, I did this stuff and got away with it until I couldn't. But because of the way he personifies, he takes us along the journey with him, and he's like, what would you do, if you were there, you know? Yeah. And he uses humor and like calling us his brothers. And so at some point you feel like you're walking the journey with him. And so it makes you endeared to him to a certain extent.
I mean, he's obviously a very kind of clever man, but also very devious as well. I mean, there were things like, evading capture by sort of cutting off his fingerprints. I mean, and also breaking out of jail as well, and managing to get out of the country. I mean, how do you feel he sort of portrayed that? Was that part of his chest pumping, as you described it earlier, just sort of showing people how he could evade the system, how he was cleverer than the system?
His cleverness shows from early on, I think, because he was among the first 9 Black people to join the school he joined. So he was he was book smart, if we start from there. Yeah. And you notice even in the way when people ask him questions, there's a way his mind operates in such a way that he always has answers at the tip of his fingers. And never did he ever give a truthful answer. There's no bit in this book where he actually says the truth about anything. There's a different story every time. There's a different explanation to something every time. So he has all these aliases. So there's like his entire existence is a lie. Starting from the time when he got expelled from school, he could have just gone home and told his parents, I've been expelled. But what does he do? He lies. And then goes back home, steals his dad's money, comes to Nairobi. He even lies about the person he gave his box to, the box that got stolen. And he says he gave the guy who was sitting where the box was, but it wasn't the real person. And so when he found out that he might not get away with that, he decided to go a different direction. And so his entire, I don't know if he knows anything else besides deceit. His entire narrative is a big lie.
Almost like he's got a split personality.
Yeah,
he lives this sort of separate,
and I feel like
life.
He lied so much at some point he didn't even know where the truth was, what the truth was and what the lie was. Because even his wife, he lied to a woman he was living with until the day she found out. And this was when he was, catch-22, where he's either I get caught with a gun or I give her. And she just came through for her husband and didn't say anything about it, So I even think, even in his writing, even in prison, I feel like the book, there's a lot of hyperbole in the way it's written. So I actually still think even the book, the way it's narrated, it might not entirely be true. The whole story may not be 100% the truth.
I mean, what you say is quite interesting. I mean, for me, he was a clever man, as you say, a book smart man, living in a very difficult time in Kenya, post-colonialism. There wasn't a lot of opportunity to really sort of use your brains at that time if you were a Kenyan. Mm-hmm. Do you think that this might have been a sort of a way for him to use his intelligence and I don't know. I sort of feel like that might have been an outlet. He could work the system or beat the system because he couldn't in other ways.
I would agree with that if he had tried, but he didn't even give it a chance. He didn't try, so it doesn't work out, and then say, okay, so I tried it didn't work out, so I decided to go in this other direction. He actually just came and delved straight into the life of crime. It's like it was just carved out for him.
Right.
So perhaps, yes, it's post-colonial Kenya. A lot of people are shifting to Nairobi because that's where there's this illusion of that's where opportunities are. And there could be a chance that may have been an issue because there's one of the members he would rob with was a captain, and he apparently had, like, he said he was one of the smartest people he'd ever met. But this guy had lost 3 jobs and he couldn't keep a job for one reason or another, but he was a very, very smart person. So there might be that issue of, yes, he's a black person, it's post-colonial Kenya, they're not given that many opportunities to be able to do so much more. And for captain, then yes, that there's the bit of the opportunities were not there. But for him as Jack Zolo, he didn't even give it a try. He didn't even try. He just decided this is how I want to do it and went with it.
I mean, nowadays it's very seductive, isn't it? I mean, we were talking earlier just about sort of some of the, Peaky Blinders and,
yes.
And Lupin as well, where, you know, the heroes are criminals.
Yes.
Mastermind criminals.
Yes. Robin Hood.
Robin Hood, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and we would want to think, I mean, when he started off, he was trying to put food on the table, right? But it got to a point where when he made the money, if he was going to turn his life around, every time he made some good amount of money, he could have bought that taxi that he did towards the end where he got arrested. He could have bought that taxi and started the taxi business early on. But every time he made the bucks, he didn't even put them to any good use. He would end up drinking all the money, using it on women. And so even the issue of morality just doesn't just show with him committing crime. It's even how he wouldn't even try to be in a proper relationship, quote unquote, and he was always trying to pay for to sleep with women. I don't know if I can say pay for sex.
Of course you can. You can say anything. This is a podcast.
Yeah, if he has to pay for sex, and even how he regarded the women. So and even when he moved to Congo, it's not like he was trying to be in a proper relationship. He decided, he's met 2 women and they all like him. You know what? Why choose? Why do I have to make the hard choice of picking one? I could just have the both of them, get the both of them pregnant, and then live with their dads and bosses millions of money, you know. So
this is a guy who you feel is rotten to the core. So you feel he was.
He is. I don't know if I can say so much to that outside of the book, but he really is.
And so I was going to ask you the question about why you think he keeps on going back to crime, because he's sort of slightly repentant, but then he kind of tries to make it, tries to get out of it, but then keeps going back. So you don't really believe that this is your argument about him saying that, in trying to paint himself as a kind of a hero, but he's actually sort of not.
He's not. The reason being, after this book, he's in prison, right? And he says he wouldn't do it again. But he gets released because of good conduct. And he goes back out there. He actually goes and robs and gets back into the life of crime. And so I think there's a thrill to it for him. Yeah. And it's always the fact that he can actually cheat his way around things. Right. And there's a way he's always getting so lucky. He goes into a toilet and is able to escape through the windows. And I kept asking myself, is it that back in the day the police didn't know that people can escape through windows? Is it that they found out after John Kiriamiti did it? That's when they decided, okay, so when we take a criminal to the toilet, we have to be wary of the windows, because that's a possible way for them to escape, But there's how he portrays that, like, that puts him in a position where he's way too lucky to the point where you're thinking, okay, is this even possible, And even cutting his fingers so that his prints do not show. I'm wondering, didn't the police see that his hands were swollen, that they were bleeding? At what point was he able to escape with all that, Yeah. So I feel like maybe initially he started to survive. But there's something within him that just really loves the thrill of breaking the law. That's how he robbed his dad to start with. That's how he got expelled from school to begin, like at the very, very beginning.
And I mean, he's obviously, you touched on his deceitfulness and also the alcoholism as well.
Yes.
How much do you think that sort of had a part to play in who he became?
So the deceit, deceit is all through the entire book, and even I think there are other books because he's written 5 books after that, and even so, I think the deceit, like him lying, and he could lie so well, you know. Did you not, like, every time you read it, and he tells us there's a way his mind he even would know when to lie to his co-conspirators or even like the gang members, even about where he lives, you know, so that they never know where he stays. That was his driving force. I think there was just a certain thrill in being able to manipulate people and getting things out of it. That's a thrill for him, being able to see that he can actually manipulate the truth and make something out of it. He'd make a fantastic politician, I think. He should try it. If he wasn't too old, that's something he could go for. I mean,
the other people that he deceives a lot are the women in his lives, as you were saying earlier. I mean, you know, that there's sort of like this dual personality, isn't it? He's got this kind of this criminal background, but this kind of reputable, is that the right word, sort of front. And so tell me a little bit about what you felt about the women in the book, or how he portrays the women in the book.
He portrays them as being naive first, and then but also very intuitive, you know. There's the naive bit is how he actually lied to them, and they would all fall for him. Some are threatening to commit suicide if he doesn't marry them. Millie goes along with his plans, finds out he's a criminal, but still stays on. And now, and she's even trying to protect him, you know, she's even covering for his crimes. So he portrays women, and then there's also the portrayal of women as like below, I don't know, like just bottom of the barrel, you know, because if he'd be like, oh yeah, that girl is just a prostitute, like, and he describes so many of them as prostitutes, and he knows them. How does he know they're all prostitutes if he's not trying to get with them, you know? But when he portrays them as prostitutes, he makes the prostitution look like a crime when it's the women, but like when men are paying them to sleep with them, they get away with it. Like, it's not their fault. The women are prostituting by themselves, you know? The men play no part to it because they're paying for it. Yeah. So there's the portrayal of women as bottom of the barrel. There's naivety. There's also the bit of them being very sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah. So naive, because even the two, and then also the bit where even the naivety comes to with the bit where when he comes and introduces himself to them, like none of them tries to do some due diligence to find out who this person is. Yeah. He comes, tells them he's the son of a vice president, and they all fall for him, and they want to be married in like 3-4 months. Although I understand them wanting to be married because they're pregnant, because back in the 70s and 80s, it's not like you'd get married, have a baby, and be a single mom, you know. Then when you get with a man, the idea is to end up marrying them, yeah. So if you're pregnant, and it shows even in the part where Millie says, if she ends up pregnant and she's not married to him, she'd be fired from her place of work. Mm-hmm. So, and that's why she kept insisting that they need to get married before she can proceed to get pregnant, yeah, so that she doesn't lose her job. Yeah. So back in that day, being a single mom was clearly not something that was frowned upon, and so there's that aspect of women being seen as inferior beings. Mm-hmm. But there's a way he portrays Millie's mom as someone who would do whatever it takes to protect her children. She was selling unlicensed alcohol to put a roof over her children, and she was the type of woman who would beat you and stab you with a Somali knife if you dared go to the house of where her daughters were staying. Yeah. So there's that portrayal of strength and doing whatever it takes to protect the people you love. Also with Millie, she sees a gun, doesn't say anything because she's trying to protect her husband, and even goes to see him in jail, although it's like it's mixed feelings for her when he gets arrested, even after he stood up at the altar because he ended up getting imprisoned. But yeah, so she's still like being supportive and staying in his corner, even when things are really, really hard. So it portrays women as nurturing and very supportive as well.
So when you were discussing this with the Escape Book Club, what did the men think about Jack? What did the men and women, did they have the same opinion? They didn't see Jack as a hero. Just kind of interested to see whether they sort of might have been a little bit more sympathetic.
Actually, they weren't. I feel like there's only two people who are very sympathetic, which was so funny because I thought they would be in that bit of weird sympathizing with him, but a lot of people just saw him for filth. Yeah, I feel like only 2 or 3 people kind of like were in his corner and sympathizing with him, but the rest of even the men just felt that he really just deserves the pits, really.
And they thought it was a dated book, did they? Do you think it's kind of in essence of its time? It's located in its time, because none of those kind of opinions or views are still represented today, or do you think or would you say it's something that kind of is still sort of experienced in Kenya?
Yeah, some of that stuff is still experienced in Kenya right now. I mean, like if we are there still the naivety of like women are still considered naive by societal portrayal of women as being naive and being weak to some extent, but also there's that bit of where they're looked at as people who would do whatever it takes to protect the people that they care about. I know that there's a shift in how like being able to raise a child by yourself has been significant over the years. So now you can't be fired because you're a single parent or that you're pregnant and you don't have a husband. At least that there has been a paradigm shift with regard to that. Of course, there's still that portrayal of women as being not being able to see things for what they really are, and also believing things because we really want to believe in people as opposed to seeing them for what they are. But yeah, there's been a shift in the portrayal of women, I think, over the years, and even how the society is perceiving. I feel like there's been some growth, although there's a long way that we still have to go. There's a long way to go.
I agree.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
So the other theme that we wanted to also discuss is the role of sort of stereotypes and tribalism as well. Because he brings that into the book as well. Tell me how he kind of does that.
So John Kiriamiti is a Kikuyu person, and so he fits so well into the narrative of what Kikuyu men are like. The perception over the years has been that if someone is a criminal, if people are robbers, they probably are from that tribe, and he fits right into it so well, yeah. And so there's the entire book goes to portray that, yeah. And there's also the way he describes there's instances where he talks about people based on tribes. You'll hear him say a robbery attempt failed because a Kamba guy was the one in charge and he didn't give them proper information prior. If someone else from maybe a different tribe was in charge, this could have gone way better. There's a time when he's escaping from Rwanda, trying to get back to Uganda, then to Kenya. There's 3 air hostesses, and then he goes on to say 2 of them are Kikuyu, 1 of them was Kamba. Why is that necessary information in the book? You're wondering, okay, so how is this helping with the story, And then during his very first robbery, when he was reading the newspaper upside down, a guy passes and is like, this guy was Luo. Okay, how does that help with the plot? So there's that bit of, he has to, and I get, back in because the book was written in the 80s.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that out of its time? It kind of dates it.
Yes. Yeah, that because of that time, I think then tribalism was very huge at that particular point. We still experience tribalism now, but I feel like now the generation we're in are moving into are less and less concerned about where people are coming from, which is a beautiful thing. But in the 80s, it was definitely something that was a big deal. Okay. And then also there's when he goes to Congo, there's a bit where he meets an Indian guy, and this Indian guy just gets to see the number plate of Jack Zolo's car, and it's a Kenyan number plate, and he welcomes him to his hotel and he feeds him. were this Indian in Kenya and he saw Jack Zolo, he wouldn't give him the same treatment. It's just that when they're in a different country, now the classism drops. Yeah. And now they're kins. They're both foreigners. They're both immigrants. They're both foreigners in a different country. Yeah. And so there's that togetherness of, we're from the same country. And so he appreciates him more based on that. And then when you portray crime, there's an Indian who steals cars and refurbishes them or like remakes them, but like the way he's not portrayed like a criminal. Him is in a white collar robbery, and so even his portrayal is in a different light. Okay. Yeah, so for him he's put to us like a person who's just doing illegal work, but in a cool way, so we'll let it pass.
Only if you've got a gun are you a real kind of
yes. If you have a gun and you're black, then you are too criminal. But if you'll send someone to steal a car and bring it, and then you'll repurpose the car, make it a whole different thing, you don't qualify as a criminal. You're just trying to survive. You're a businessman.
So there's a class system in criminals as well.
Yes.
And how much do you think the role of you talked about the humor as well within the book?
Yeah.
What do you think he uses? In what way do you think John uses humor?
There's some specific. I highlighted them. I'd have to find them. But there's specific places where he actually when he refers to us directly and he says something that is very funny. There's one, I can't remember the exact quote, but there's places where he actually will say something and you'll be laughing at the back of your head and you're like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But there's a bit of touch with humor. I can't remember the specific context to that, but I feel like there's a bit of bits and pieces of humor that are used that make you enjoy the book. Although if I am to describe the style of writing, I feel like it's very simple.
Yes.
It's so simple.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so simple, but you also understand he didn't do any much learning, and it's in the 80s. He doesn't have any he's not a skilled author, so he's just writing it from his prison cell. So it would make sense that the book would end up the way it did.
And then at the end, of course, it's a kind of you touched on it before, but he's arrested kind of on the eve of his wedding?
Yes.
And then he's sentenced to prison, and then he writes this best-selling book, and he becomes a very famous author, and there are queues all around Nairobi trying to get this book. I mean, for me, I kind of feel like that's another sort of extraordinary thing, and a story of redemption and just sort of turning his life around. Is that true?
Well, that's what we want to believe. We want to believe that his life is turned around and that now he's on the straight and narrow. But I don't know. I feel like maybe there's still bits of him that are still there. There's still bits of this person in the book that still exist in the person that he is right now.
I mean, it must be so hard to change because, he's had a whole life growing up as a criminal. Then you spend 20 years in prison.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, he got let back, but he can't, that sort of education, must be very, very difficult to sort of shake off in terms of, how your brain works.
True. And also the fact that our prison system and our justice system is not about redemption, really. It's about punishment. And it's not like when you go in there, they try and rehabilitate you. The prison system is not about rehabilitation and making you a better person so that by the time you're serving your sentence and you're out, you're a reformed human being. The idea there is to make your life as hard as possible. Just maybe you will regret your crimes. And when you leave, you'll be like, I don't want to go back in there. But what we've had over the years, and when you find out, when you do a bit of research with the prison system, it's a lot of people will come out and go back in because it's not like when you're in there, you have been given the tools to be able to survive out. And once you get out and you're an ex-con, chances of you getting employment, of being taken back into the society and being seen as a proper person who has a right to earn a living and make a life for themselves, it's not that easy. And so for a lot of people, I feel like you need so much willpower to leave that space and come out here and say, I'm not going back there. Because more often than not, they leave the prison system, come, and they're back in there. Kind of like it happened for a lot of guys even in the book. They leave the prison system. He did that. He got released after 20 years, came back out, and he was thrown back in immediately after, like a short while after. So it's not rehabilitation per se. It's just you're punished, come out, then go back in. So I don't know if there's redemption at the end really, but I wouldn't speak for him as being a redeemed person.
No, I definitely agree with you about the prison system and punishment. It certainly doesn't work for my kids.
Yeah. It doesn't work for anybody.
No, it doesn't. I think you're right. It definitely needs. Well, definitely in the UK, it definitely needs to be looking at the sort of reforms to the prison system.
Yeah.
Taking people out of society does not allow them to be able to function when they get put back in it. And often they have, this is why I think is interesting with John, and not suggesting he does at all, but he's obviously got a very different brain, and so sometimes to fit it within society's parameters, it can be quite difficult if you've got that kind of, sort of slightly different, your brain just works in a different way.
Yes.
And so, maybe that's why he turned to crime, and perhaps, he was able to write a book, which is an extraordinary thing.
Which makes me think that even if he got legal, even if he came to Nairobi and got a day job, say he's working in an office, he wouldn't have sustained it. He wouldn't have been able to stay on, because the way you've said it, the way his mind is set up, he's clearly he's very smart. He's brilliant. His IQ that's how he's able to lie on a whim, and his lies are very you could work with them. It's not a silly lie. It's not a stupid lie. It's a lie that he can work with. And so actually the thrill that came with being able, I feel that adrenaline rush was just the thing that kept him going, and maybe keeps him going until now.
So he should have either been a politician or even a policeman. Like the police should have kind of brought it into their side, because he was always one sort of step ahead of them.
Yes, they should have thought about that, and he would have been made a fantastic one, because he would be thinking the way the criminals are thinking, and then getting there before they do.
Mogoi, it's been amazing talking to you. I definitely think you would have passed your KCSE with flying colours if you had read this book, allowed to read this book.
I really would. I actually enjoyed reading it. I would give it a rating of maybe a 4 out of 10, but it's all right. It's an all right read. It's okay. It's. I mean, if you haven't read it, please grab a copy. You would enjoy it a bit. And
I think for me it was most interesting because it's an insight into kind of the different tribes, cultures, kind of post-colonial Kenya. For me it was a very educational book. I think
the education bit is quite there. I don't know if I would encourage my child to read it. I'd keep it away from her as much as possible. Until she's 18, then I'm like, okay, so if you want to do crime, go.
Or don't ever be with a man like this.
Please, that bit especially. That bit.
Not to be with. Amazing.
Don't be hiding guns from men.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for having me.